It's Tuesday, the
Fifth?
5th of January 2016. I'm Peter Williamson. I'm interviewing Wolfgang Duntz at his house in Miller Road on Bowen Island for the Cultural Master Plan. Wolfgang, thank you for agreeing to be interviewed. My first question to you is, can you tell us a bit about what you do for a living and for recreation, including what types of artistic and cultural activities you participate in?
Well, that's simple. What I do for a living is we develop land, build homes, and build facilities for business purpose, cultural purposes. We've built a church, retreat centers, shopping centers, lots of homes. So that's what we do to make a living, which is tough on Bowen Island, but we have survived. And for recreational, I used to spend time on the water. We have an old wooden boat, which I dearly love. But being at an age where recreation becomes almost less important and it takes a lot of effort, whereas the easiest for me to recreate is actually keep working. I love what I'm doing. So for me, spending a weekend behind my desk or just walking and thinking is actually a marvelous recreation. So
Okay.
It sounds maybe very boring, but...
Well, no, not at all. Can I bring you back to what types of artistic and cultural activities you do participate in?
Culture, I had since early childhood and throughout my life a tremendous interest in mostly spiritual issues. So I read a lot. I read and I write a lot. We'll probably never have the time to publish anything. But and you cannot be, I don't really like the term spirituality, but I think being on this place, it's marvelous to live, but there's more than just what we experience here. There's more about the role we play during our life in a bigger picture. So for me, culture is actually how can we live without considering our existence here as part of culture. That starts with the culture of how we live, how we interact, how we eat, how we dress, how we think. So for me, culture is not just music and painting. Culture is just how do you experience life.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Can you tell us a story of one of your most memorable cultural or artistic experiences on Bowen? It could be as a performer, a participant, an amateur, or a reader, listener, member of an audience.
Oh, we would need a few hours to come to a real story here. But a few profound things. There was first that I ran into Ted Spear, marvelous man, great vision. And Ted Spear's acquaintances goes back to the time when Doug Berry and we had in mind to build a community college, what is now Parkview Slopes. Great vision, and it was supposed to create a small college to teach crafts and arts which are at the point of being extinct. And there's a lot, sometimes hundreds of years of knowledge and skills, which once they are gone, they're gone. Mm. And unfortunately, we couldn't convince the powers to be at that time to do it. But what has now become the Island Pacific School was one of the core items. What is now Rivendell, and Rivendell has become a great success as a spiritual retreat, was basically the think tank. But it was not so much spiritual, it was just to provide the accommodation for people, guests coming over here, spending a week or a month, just to teach and share their experiences of a lifetime. So the remnants of that is now IPS, and IPS by now is doing quite well. Unfortunately, the location is not as good as it could have been. Same applies to the Kate Hill Chapel. That was supposed to be the spiritual core there. And then Rivendell, which has taken on a life on its own and a marvelous life. So the people I met, Ted Spear, and then the Bentards, Howard and Shirley Bentard, marvelous people. And meeting them was a revelation. And I think our relationship has morphed into way more, because I learned a lot, got introduced to people with a depth which I hadn't experienced before. Was great.
Thank you. So, when you are at your most creative, what are you doing? I think you've partly answered this, but for example, what types of artistic or cultural activities do you enjoy, and are there any that, especially that you've taken up since you came to Bowen? I know this sort of is...
I have a few passions. One's are wooden boats, so I could spend the rest of my life just restoring wooden boats or just work on my boat. So varnishing, woodworking, improving, polishing old engines, that is... But in the old days, most wood items were put together by artisans. There is spirit in them. And just to acknowledge, since it took the time and you had quite some knowledge, you dealt with people who had a great respect for what they could create. If it's not for that, anything which is old needs restoration, I love. I could devote the rest of my life to restore another boat or another old car. For the times in between, I love to read, and I normally read 4 or 5 books at a time. And it takes me forever to finish a book, because I can hardly read 2 or 3 pages without then writing at least 2 or 3 pages. So that's my recreation, and I would say ultimately, hopefully, an artistic talent. I'm not sure. My kids will have a tough time to go through those thousands of pages and say, well, what is worth keeping or not? And I can only hope it will not all end up in a dumpster.
Yeah, we hope. Is there anything that's holding you back from participating in or attending more creative and artistic activities?
The lack of time. So my life is so full, and I love it. So if I ever die, I want to die on my desk or in a comfortable chair over a book or so. So at my age, that little time I've left, I'm fully booked.
When you think of arts and culture on Bowen, what person or what place first comes to mind? Or what or who do you think is our greatest cultural asset on Bowen?
I would say Bowen Island as a whole. Bowen Island is meant to be a center of arts and culture. Actually, when I came to Bowen Island for the first time in the mid-70s, now that goes back to my experiences which I gained in Europe, all over Europe. There are very special places, and they have created, or they have been morphed into still special places by attracting special people. So you cannot have arts and culture and anything really outstanding without very special people. And special people feel attracted to special places. And there's all kinds of things. You cannot create them. It's either there or it's not. So if you have a perfect place, then it hopefully will attract the people, and it naturally happens. It would be an illusion to say, well, let's create an artistic community. No, you create an environment where they feel comfortable. And very often you have to enable them. Artists are not known to make a lot of money. So the very first thing is you have to create the base. Where can I live at a very modest income? And I don't feel like basically a failure. So the acceptance and the support of people who devote their life for art is almost a social thing. Because
well, I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
I think we're going to come back to this later.
Okay.
So, culturally, what do you think most differentiates us from Vancouver?
Well, the people, the people. I'm not in love with Vancouver anymore. I cannot see. It's a marvelous place to be if you really want to immerse yourself in urbanity. But I did not come to Canada to live an urban lifestyle. Here you have almost the perfect setting. You have not only rural, and it's not quite rural, it's an insular setting. Within 30 or 60 minutes of being close to a metropolitan, which is in itself very invigorating. But would I like to live to there? No. But the people, and more people will live there, and for them Bowen Island will become a jewel. And that's so important to keep this jewel-like. And how can you attract the right people better than by having an atmosphere, an ambiance of arts and culture? Not entertainment. Can you imagine to say, well, this would be a great resort town and have a few casinos and bet on entertainment. But this would be the death of Bowen Island. So I could not imagine, as a matter of fact, I could never imagine that Bowen Island would not eventually become a center of arts and culture with some spiritual elements. That has been my vision since I came.
Thank you. In terms of culture, what's changed the most since you arrived? What do you see changing the most right now?
It depends on how we define culture, but I would say the culture of people interacting. When I came, we are a community of summer people, and they were summer people, but they didn't really make the culture of Bowen Island. It was a very modest, very, very modest community, and in order to live here with very modest meant you had different expectations, and the tremendous neighborhood help, reliance on neighbors, enjoying life with very modest means had been the lifestyle of Bowen Island. Actually, that's what attracted me. I mean, we came over here and we were probably more the summer people, or had a lifestyle. We bought a waterfront lot and we were quite well off. So we did not fit in here. But I fit into this community. And we moved here after we lived 2 years in West Vancouver. I never fitted in there. It comes back to the culture is a matter how you live and where are your values. If your values are represented mostly in the size of your home, in the class of your car, in the friendships you have, that's a valuable standard of living. However, if you say, well, I want to experience life as it is, namely to deal with people who not necessarily struggle, but cope with life without having the luxury to overcome the real challenges. You see, we all have challenges. If we don't have them on a material level, then we are sick, or we have partnership problems, relationship problems, whatever problems. But here on Bowen Island, it was mostly people struggling on a material level. But it's easy to struggle on a material level being embedded in a culture and a community which helps, and where I don't have to pretend that you're a great success. You see? Because success cannot be measured by how big your car is or how much you have on your bank account. Success is how you go through your life. And that's here you had a chance to become a success and not be measured by your income. So, convoluted answer probably.
Is there any particular type of artistic or cultural activity that you'd like to learn more about if you only knew who on Bowen to ask?
Oh, at this point in my life, I would love to dance. Now my body is old and creaking, so I would love to dance. Solitary dance. The art of dancing from ballet, there is such a beauty in it. I would do that. I have no particular talents in music. painting, it's probably too late. I would say woodwork and dancing.
Thanks. In a few words, and I think you've partly answered this, but what brought you to Bowen Island, and what would you most miss if you had to leave?
What I would miss as a people, and I tell you, I have known the people and they caused a lot of hurt in my life, but it's not hurting that I have misgivings for the people. It was just where I came from. I think on many occasions, I didn't feel that I was understood. And I always felt if you had more time to understand, you would understand me better. Now the change, and that's how it started. The change is I see now more and more people coming over here who know better. That's strange. So my way of thinking and where I would love to see Bowen Island eventually going is now better understood. But the risks have grown as well because the people who understand better have the means to get their way. And those ways are not necessarily with the origins of the vision. So it's a very difficult question to ask. In a way now, I feel with many newcomers who come over here for the right reasons, they immediately understand where I've been, where I come, and where I want to go. With many of those who have been here 30 years ago, I don't think that they will ever get it. Their kids understand. And I just had the benefit or the handicap of coming from a much older culture. So I came over here and saw that as basically virgin. But those defenders of the virginity no, that's strange. If we call this virginity, they never had allowed the virginity to bear children.
Mm-hmm.
So they were basically the first one who preached celibacy. Celibacy, is that probably English?
Yes.
And forgot that we need children.
Okay. Oh, it was a good metaphor. Well, this is my final question, Wolfgang, and it's an open-ended one. Do you have any other thoughts about Bowen's artistic or creative needs, its strengths, its opportunities, or ideas about our culture and its development?
Well, Bowen Island obviously has a future, and the future does not happen, or it happens by chance, and that's hardly ever the best future. So to have a focus on arts and culture for Bowen Island is great if that finds the true recognition. I would say that matched with having the ongoing respect for nature, preservation of nature, what we have, marry the deep-rooted and deep appreciation for what we have by way of nature, the environment what we have, with art and culture. The whole spectrum of that will lead to something actually as a side product, but equally important. A sound cultural base provides a lot of jobs, to be very, very bold, because artists need to make a living, and the people who are interested in art have to come over, stay over here, not tourists, but people who come over here for good reason. And I can quote dozens, maybe hundreds of places in Europe, in the Swiss, German, Austrian, Italian Alps, where villages have lived for, by now, 150 years, just based on arts and culture. Where they come, those people who understand culture. And my hometown was close to Bremen on the North Sea, Worpswede. It has been created before the last big depression in the 1910, 1915, has flourished ever since because it has attracted more and more artists. Those artists attract people who appreciate art. They immerse themselves, most of them just for a weekend, they make their vacation, but they have art festivals. It is a brimming, but it's not a phony community, because the guests are appreciative of their hosts and the hosts appreciate the guests. It's not just mercantile. There is a real base and a deep, deep sense of mutual respect and understanding. So that's what I would like to see. But we will never experience that unless we provide the means for people to live here who do not have, or who cannot or don't care to have a high income. So for me, I'm not a social reformer. I'm not preaching affordability of housing because I'm do-gooder. No, I know without that we will never have the kind of community which Bowen Island should have, deserves, and probably will move Bowen Island as a very outstanding place. So affordable housing, which is tough to create or maintain. It's very tough. Economic development, I would say we don't have to worry about if we really put a high emphasis on arts and culture, and that includes education. You see, people coming and are appreciative for culture or arts. They don't mind, or they would love to come here for every year for a week or two to learn string instruments or perfect string instruments or paint or being taught calligraphy or to paint musical notes. And that's what Europe has created, places where people with special interests, mostly artistic, go, very often immerse themselves at least for a week, sometimes for months, to perfect their skills. So that's, I would say, recreation. And it's I hate the word tourists, because they are not tourists, they're students. And you see, just for them to come is a compliment to the place.
Yeah. Is there anywhere in Canada that you think comes close to doing this sort of thing? Or?
If they have it, I haven't found them, but I haven't really actively looked. And now, some caution. I'm not arrogant. I hope I'm not. But my vision, my experiences are by now all 40, 50 years old. And I love those. What I've seen, a few communities you find in the States, and they're parts normally of universities, where you have a university campus. So my vision would be to create a community where arts and artistic endeavors are taught, and they will attract over time the most gifted teachers, and that's marvelous to have. And Bowen Island has the qualities to attract them, and they will in turn attract the most serious and most gifted students. And those students are not 17, maybe it's a few, but most will be in the middle age, old age. And that in itself, and the closeness to Vancouver and where we live, is almost predestined to become. Unless we just create a community here for just the rich and famous, which would be probably a very attractive community, but it would not be the community I came for.
Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I was way too fast and spoke too much, so you will have to do some editing.
No, I'm going to leave it entirely up to Dave Pollard and Chris. Chris.
So my love for this place is very intense, very deep, and with that intenseness, intensivity, whatever the proper English word for that would be, and depth, there comes a lot of passion. So That's why my fuses are sometimes short, and I have to learn to be patient. But on the other hand, I'm 74 in a few weeks. How much life do I have? So will I learn patience now? Probably not. Peter.
Thank you, Wolfgang. That's very nice of you. I'll stop it there.